In the dawn of time, when the first footsteps echoed across the virgin earth, and daughters of men were born, the world lay in a serene silence, untouched by the passage of days. This was an age before the great deluge, a forgotten epoch when the earth was in its prime. Rivers flowed with crystal clarity, and forests stretched endlessly into the horizon. Yet, within the depths of the human soul, a sinister force began to stir, the Nephilim. The saga unfolds in the era of Jared, a generation before Enoch, two before the legendary Noah. As the earth thrived and humanity spread like wildfire across valleys and mountains, a shadow crept into the hearts of men. Envy festered, and wickedness wove its dark threads between families, tainting what was once pure. In this tumultuous time, celestial beings descended from the heavens, known as the Sons of God. The Watchers were sent to oversee and protect mankind. These mighty angels observed humanity's ascent, but as time passed, their gaze faltered. They beheld the daughters of men, radiant and full of life, unlike any creature they had ever encountered. They watched them by the rivers, through the fields, beneath the sun's golden embrace, and a forbidden desire ignited within them. Instead of guardianship, they yearned for them. They longed to take them as brides, to entwine their destinies with those they were destined to protect. Then Semyaza, their leader, summoned the others to a plain near Mount Hermon, where they made a dark oath. He was afraid of being the only one to fall into temptation and bear the guilt alone. So he gathered 200 and told them, "Let us all swear and curse ourselves if we turn back." And so they swore a pact that would be their doom. Suddenly, they all descended, the heavens parted, and the earth shook as their feet touched the ground. Their bodies took on human form, but they didn't belong to the world of men. They shone with a strange light, and their eyes burned like embers. They were too perfect, too terrifying. The men looked at them in astonishment, unsure if they were witnessing a miracle or the beginning of a curse. In a short time, the Watchers took the daughters of men for themselves. They married them, and from these unions were born beings never seen before. These were giants of immense stature, possessing the strength of 10 men. They were called Nephilim. Initially, they were seen as ancient heroes, figures who raised cities, vanquished beasts, and carried stones no mortal could lift. But soon, their true nature was revealed. They were not saviors, but ravenous monsters. The Nephilim began to dominate human tribes. Their size and power made them absolute rulers, claiming lands and demanding tributes. The people feared and revered them as gods. Before long, the Nephilim's hunger grew unchecked. They first consumed fruits, clearing entire harvests until fields were left barren. Then they began to hunt livestock, devouring whole herds. Yet their hunger became insatiable, and when the earth no longer sufficed to satisfy them, they turned their gaze towards mankind. They took human lives without remorse, hunting them as prey and devouring entire villages as if they were mere beasts. Horror spread from valley to valley, and no one could stop them. Meanwhile, the Watchers, intoxicated by their own transgressions, began to force impure breeding between species, creating deformed creatures that roamed the forests and fields like abominations that should never exist. Corruption spread across the land like a plague, and what was once a paradise began to transform into a place of horror and despair. With their colossal hands, they built stone cities so immense that they resembled mountains, and they erected walls adorned with human skulls, macabre trophies of those who dared to resist. The fortresses turned into temples of terror, and the people began to worship them as if they were gods, their names spoken with fear and reverence. Og, the giant of the highlands, Arba, founder of fortresses, Ankh, lord of the valleys, and Gilgamesh, hero and monster. To each one, human sacrifices, songs, and offerings were presented in hopes of appeasing their wrath. And then they began to unveil forbidden knowledge that was never meant to be shared with mankind. Azazel taught men how to forge swords that sliced like lightning, create impenetrable shields, craft jewels that dazzled with their brilliance, and make cosmetics for women to enhance their allure and charm. Tamil introduced enchantments, words that bound wills, and arts of seduction that kindled passions and deceit. Other watchers unlocked the mysteries of the heavens and stars, imparting astrology and astronomy, not to admire creation, but to manipulate it. They revealed spells, herbs for witchcraft, and ways to twist the sacred into something dark. All of humanity plunged, without realizing, into an abyss from which it could no longer return on its own. They learned to craft weapons, to ignite forbidden desires, to conjure and curse. Earth became a workshop of sin. Cities were filled with cries and bloodshed. Violence was celebrated. Battles turned into spectacles, and men emulated the cruelty of their new masters. The seasons began losing their rhythm. Spring arrived late, winter stretched longer than it should, and fields ceased to bloom. The trees bore twisted fruits, animals were born deformed, and the rivers, once crystal clear, now ran dark, as if creation itself was ailing. Everything alive had turned rotten, and the entire world, unaware, was marching toward an inevitable judgment. Then God gazed upon the corrupted earth and declared with a resolute voice, "My spirit will not remain in humans forever, for they are only mortal. Thus they shall live only 120 years." It was both a sentence and a warning, a countdown marked upon humanity with a margin of 120 years before judgment. After that proclamation, the heavens fell silent, a heavy, unsettling silence, a sign that something dreadful was brewing. Men carried on as if they had heard nothing, yet something was stirring. The skies darkened inexplicably, and birds flew aimlessly, as if fleeing from something invisible to man. The earth began to emit a bitter odor, a heavy breath that seemed to declare that divine patience was nearing its end. Yet amidst this darkness, there walked a man unlike any other. His name was Enoch. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, bowed neither to the Nephilim nor to the Watchers. His life stood as a contradiction amidst chaos. He walked a straight path. His gaze was clear, his faith unyielding. Enoch walked with God. He stood before the Watchers and the masses and cried out fearlessly, "You have forsaken the heavens above and defiled the earth." The Watchers trembled at the sentence they knew was impending. They sought Enoch out, weeping, pleading, and handing him letters to intercede on their behalf. And one day, as Enoch prayed in silence, the sky opened before his eyes. Enoch was taken up from the earth through what he described as portals of fire. Fiery columns swirled around him, not burning him, opening like doors to another dimension. His feet left the ground, and the light enveloped him until all that was known faded away. Suddenly, he found himself in vast halls of light and darkness, places no man had ever seen. He walked through corridors of crystalline brilliance, where rivers of fire intersected with rivers of crystal, flowing without mingling. The walls shimmered as if alive, echoing with songs that no human tongue could ever articulate. There he saw mighty angels, writing in eternal books the names of men and angels, inscribing and erasing with steady hands, as blue flames illuminated each letter. Then the complete and terrible prophetic message was revealed to him. Enoch heard the judgment for the Watchers. "You have abandoned the high heavens, defiled the earth. You have fathered giants, sown corruption, taught forbidden arts, and now you will know your doom." And they also revealed the fate of the Nephilim. Peace will not be granted to them. They will be destroyed by each other's hands and by the waters that will cover the world. Their spirits will wander like shadows, roaming until the great judgment. Regarding the fallen angels, the voice of the Most High was resolute. "You will remain chained in darkness, reserved for the day of the great judgment, when you will be cast into the eternal fire." Enoch trembled, but did not retreat. He turned his gaze, and the angels pointed the way back. Thus he descended once more to the earth, fully aware that he must speak. Enoch gathered the Watchers, his voice shaky yet steadfast, delivering the final sentence. "Peace will not be granted to you. Your offspring will perish, and your names will be erased from the memory of heaven." The Watchers covered their faces, and for the first time they felt fear. Yet when he went to deliver the message to the people, they would not listen. He gathered the masses, stood among the crowds, and declared, "Hear me, people of the earth. You have seen the Watchers walking among you. You have followed their corrupt ways. Repent, for judgment is near. The Most High has decreed an end to this corruption. Enoch saw the looks of contempt. Some mocked him, others ignored him, and few paid attention to his message. Most continued to build, consume, intermingle, and kill, unaware that time was already running out. Then the moment arrived, as heaven had decided. God sent his most powerful messengers to carry out the judgment. 4 archangels were dispatched with a precise mission. Michael, God's warrior, would act against the Watchers to strip them of the power they had stolen. Raphael, the healer and executive, was given the gravest task: to capture Azazel and cast him into the depths. Gabriel, the herald of mysteries, would be the one to ignite wars among the Nephilim, leading them to destroy each other. And Uriel, the bringer of light, would descend to warn humanity, announcing the impending judgment destined to fall upon the earth.
Raphael came down first as a living flame and found Azazel hiding in Dudael, a desolate place shrouded in shadows. He bound him with chains forged from the word of God, chains that burned like embers upon his immortal skin, dragging him over sharp stones that tore at his flesh while his voice roared with rage. And there, in the heart of the abyss, he cast him down. Massive rocks sealed the entrance, and there Azazel remained, chained and forgotten, awaiting the great day of judgment. Then the archangel Michael descended to confront the remaining Watchers. He sought out those who still roamed the earth, those who hadn't been captured, and one by one he seized them, casting them into caves so deep that no sound could escape, sealing the entrances with blazing stones. Meanwhile, Gabriel fulfilled his mission amongst the Nephilim. He moved among them like a poisoned whisper, sowing distrust in their hearts. Where once there were alliances, suspicion emerged. Clans that once considered each other brothers now looked with hatred upon one another. It only took a spark for war to erupt between them. Giant against giant, brother against brother, they rose in bloody battles that shook the earth. The cities they had built crumbled, and their dominion turned into ruin. Thus began the beginning of the end, but the humans still remained. Uriel descended to earth and walked among them to warn that the time was drawing near. Uriel stopped in town squares and fields to warn them. Judgment is at the gates. The Most High has decreed the end of this corruption. What you have sown, you shall reap. But there is still a moment's reprieve. Turn back, repent, seek the Creator before the waters rise. He proclaimed in every corner that God had already heard the cry of the earth, that the rebel angels were already chained, and that the giants would soon cease to walk among men. But mankind would not listen. Men continued using the forbidden secrets of the Watchers. Violence continued to grow, and the earth was filled with blood and abominations. Yet Enoch would not be corrupted. He walked with God, and one night, while he prayed alone in the fields, suddenly the heavens opened before his eyes. Enoch was taken away. He crossed thresholds where time dissolved and was guided by radiant beings into unseen realms. Portals of fire spun around him, yet they did not burn. Pillars of light intertwined like living spirals, leading him through worlds no mortal had ever beheld. Each threshold they crossed revealed a fragment of the universe. He saw the edges of the earth and the caverns where winds sleep. He witnessed hell where rebels await judgment, and sealed Eden, where glory still dwells untouched since creation. Then they carried him to heights where sun and moon serve as obedient guardians of eternal cycles. He passed through sacred mountains that blazed without being consumed, saw the birthplaces of thunder, and crossed chambers where stars are kept. But beyond the heavens, he saw the abyss, what was to come. Corruption spreading like poison, cities built upon skulls, men worshipping forgotten giants, violence multiplying like plague. And alongside that vision, judgment was revealed to him, the scales tipping, names being erased from eternal books, waters that would come, not as rain but as sentence. Enoch listened, and he wrote. He recorded every revelation, and according to ancient accounts, he compiled 366 books containing his testimony. He wrote about the judgment of angels, about the restoration of the earth, and about the times to come. And when all that was meant to be revealed had been written down, Enoch was taken even higher, beyond the stars that govern time, and there he saw the eternal dwelling places. His eyes beheld the mystery of judgment and mercy. On one side, radiant chambers awaited the righteous, filled with peace, adorned with living light, where there is no weeping or darkness. On the other side, dark depths where wicked souls lie waiting, conscious, broken by eternal separation. And at the center of it all, the throne of the Most High. Eternal fire flowed from its foundation, and indescribable glory surrounded it. Enoch fell on his face and dared not lift his gaze, but then the Lord sent him back to earth, not as punishment, but as a witness. He must speak one final time and deliver the legacy of what he had seen. Enoch returned to the world of men, but his face was no longer the same. He no longer had fear. He gathered Methuselah, his son, along with his grandchildren and the few who still walked in righteousness, and told them what his eyes had witnessed, the prepared dwelling places, the sealed books, the names written with fire. He warned them that judgment was no empty threat and pleaded with them not to sell their souls for the pleasures of the fallen, not to surrender to the corruption of the giants or the temptation of the false angels. That day, silence fell over his house, but shortly after, Enoch announced that his time had been fulfilled. Enoch would no longer walk among men, and on the appointed day, he vanished. Enoch was taken by God, caught up, and was never seen again. For a moment, silence enveloped the earth and chaos came to a halt. Rumors said that the man of God had disappeared into the light, that he did not die like the others because he was taken alive by the Creator as the portals of heaven opened once more. But that silence was brief, for after his departure, terror seized all the known earth. The Nephilim killed one another, and cities fell under their own wickedness. Men without the prophetic voice that had restrained them unleashed their corruption like never before. The sons of the fallen raised their banners over human bones. Women taught by Tamiel intoxicated with spells, and false prophets read the stars. The watchers remained chained in the depths of the abyss, but their descendants ruled the surface like wicked kings. The mountains trembled under their steps. The earth's springs were stained with blood, and the cries of the innocent filled the air. It was then that the heavens darkened. The seasons began to confuse their times because the sun no longer shone with the same strength. Birds migrated without direction, trees twisted, and the earth, exhausted, began to groan. But in the midst of that darkness, hope appeared. His name was Noah. While the men around him had become completely corrupted by violence and sorcery, he tilled the devastated fields with clean hands. At 600 years old, he was the only one who maintained faith, raised his children in the fear of God, and each day lifted his heart to the Creator. He was a righteous man, blameless in his generation, a man who still heard the voice of heaven, and heaven chose him. God spoke with him as he had spoken with no other since the days of Enoch. I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. God announced to him the judgment that would come, the waters that would cover the earth, and chose him for an immense work. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in it and coat it with pitch inside and out. This is how you are to build it. The ark is to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Make a roof for it, leaving below the roof an opening 1 cubit high all around. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower, middle, and upper decks. Noah was left breathless, but then the Creator spoke to him of the covenant. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. Noah did not hesitate. He went out for timber and began to build. For weeks and months, Noah raised that gigantic structure. His family worked beside him while the mockery grew more cruel, but he didn't stop. The appointed day arrived. The sky could no longer hold back its judgment, and the earth, tired of drinking blood, cried out to the heavens. The world itself seemed to plead for justice. Then the sun darkened in a strange way, and the earth began to feel heavy, as if it knew that something was about to break forever. Suddenly, something happened that no one had ever seen before. Animals began approaching from every corner of the earth, guided by an invisible voice calling them from the depths of creation. They came in perfect pairs. Colorful birds, silent reptiles, mammals both large and small, all walking 2 by 2 toward that colossal structure, as if they knew exactly where they belonged. The people watched them pass by, confused and fearful, unable to understand how wild beasts moved like gentle sheep. Noah welcomed them one by one, arranging them according to the command he had received. Then he entered himself with his wife, along with his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. No one else wanted to enter. No one else believed. When everyone was inside, Noah looked one last time at the world he knew, the fields he had worked, the sky he had loved, and the corruption that had contaminated everything. Suddenly, something happened that no man could have done. The door closed with a deep, resounding sound. It was the hand of God himself that sealed the entrance. A brief silence spread around the ark, as if all creation held its breath, and then it began. The sky darkened as though a heavy shroud covered the sun's light, and with a roar that shook the foundations of the earth, the fountains of the great deep burst open. The earth split open, and waters hidden since the days of creation burst forth with unstoppable fury. The windows of heaven opened wide, and torrents of rain fell without rest. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rains never stopped. Rivers overflowed their banks. Fields were buried beneath new seas, and the entire world became a boundless ocean. Men ran searching for higher ground, climbed trees, screamed the names of gods who could not save them. The Nephilim, those giants who once ruled with absolute power, also felt fear. Neither their size nor their strength could help them. They were seen fleeing, scaling mountains that would soon be swallowed by the waters. They tried building fortresses on stone pillars, sought out the tallest trees, swam through raging torrents. Gilgamesh, one of the great Nephilim, raised his arms to the sky and cried out in desperation, "Is this your vengeance?" His voice was lost in the storm as the waters covered him. Og, another of the Colossi, tried to swim with strokes that moved entire waves, but the abyss swallowed him like a helpless child. The Nephilim fell one after another amid muffled screams and furious whirlpools. And far below, deep within the earth, the chained watchers listened to the fury of the flood from their prisons of stone and fire, hearing the fulfillment of the judgment they themselves had brought upon the world. In the abyss, Azazel screamed in his captivity, his voice breaking in the absolute darkness, powerless, knowing his fate was sealed. Meanwhile, in the heavens, a silent judgment was taking place. The books were opened, and the names of the Nephilim, those giants who had risen against the order of creation, were erased one by one. There would be no memory of them left in the eternal records. Heaven celebrated justice, while the earth cleansed itself with tears of water. The stars, hidden for days, began to shine once more through the cracks in the clouds, and the balance of the universe, twisted by centuries of corruption, finally began to right itself. The world was changing forever, while the ark floated upon endless waters, guarding within its walls humanity's last hope. Its wood groaned under the pressure of the waves, but did not break. Inside, Noah prayed, his voice low but steady, rising up as thunder crashed outside. The water kept rising until the mountains were covered, until the last peak disappeared beneath the raging waters. No flesh remained upon the earth, not man, nor beast, nor bird that drew breath. All perished, except those who were within the ark. Time passed and the waters began to recede slowly. Day after day the level dropped, and for the first time in ages, the earth showed itself again beneath the clear sky. Finally, the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat, standing firm like a monument of hope in the midst of a renewed world. Inside, Noah waited patiently. He watched the horizon and searched for signs, but saw only water. Then he opened the window and released a raven, and the raven flew back and forth, seeking a place to land, but found none. After several days, Noah released a dove. The dove flew away and at first returned having found no rest, but tried again. After 7 more days, the dove returned with something unexpected, a fresh olive leaf in its beak. Noah's heart filled with hope. He knew the earth was beginning to heal. A week later, he released the dove once more, and this time it did not return, a sign that it had finally found a place to dwell. When they finally came down from the ark, what they found was a transformed world. The fields were clean, the air was different, the mountains gleamed beneath a renewed sky. Noah felt the weight of what had just happened and knew what he had to do. He gathered stones, built a simple but sacred altar, and upon it offered sacrifices of clean animals. The smoke rose to heaven like a perfume of gratitude, like a declaration of faith in the future. Then God spoke again, not with judgment, but with promise. He looked upon the new earth and said, "I will never again curse the ground because of man, nor will I ever again destroy every living thing as I have done." And so that word would be marked in the heart of all. He left an eternal sign. In the sky, something new, a rainbow, an arc of light suspended between the clouds, brilliant, immense. It was the mark of an eternal covenant, a reminder for every generation that God had decided to give a new beginning. Each time the rain would touch the earth and the sun would break through the clouds, that sign would appear again as a promise. Justice had been fulfilled, and now a new chapter began under God's promise. In time, Noah's family came down from the ark and began to multiply. Shem, Ham, and Japheth spread across the earth, carrying with them the memory of judgment and the promise of a new beginning. Each one took different paths, and from their steps, entire nations were born. Ham headed toward the warm lands of the south. There, in the valleys of Egypt and in the plains of Canaan, his descendants raised cities and towers. From his lineage would arise Nimrod, the man who became famous as a mighty hunter before the Lord, builder of kingdoms like Babel, Erech, and Nineveh, cities that would mark history with their greatness and their rebellion. Japheth moved northward, toward cold and mountainous regions, where peoples and cultures would be born that would spread far beyond what Noah could have imagined. Shem, however, remained close to the line of promise. From him would come a different people, marked by faith, from whom would arise patriarchs, prophets, and finally the root of blessing for all nations. As time passed, languages began to multiply. What had once been a single tongue became fragmented, creating barriers and new identities. Peoples were born, kingdoms arose, and the earth was once again filled with different voices, each with its own story and destiny. Yet among these new stories, ancient echoes began to emerge. After the flood, legends of new giants started to circulate. When the waters receded and the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, it seemed that everything was over, that evil had been swept away, and that the Nephilim had been completely eliminated. But the story is not so simple. The Bible ends with the destruction of all flesh, with the purification of the world by water. However, some apocryphal texts and ancient traditions suggest something disturbing, that the blood of the giants may have survived, not by force, but through inheritance. According to these sources, one of the wives of Noah's sons, probably Ham's, could have carried the mark of the fallen in her genetic lineage. She wasn't a giant, but her blood was contaminated. If this theory is true, it would explain why, centuries later, giants emerge again on the earth. Not like before, in dominant hordes, but as persistent remnants of a forgotten age. And they weren't mythological figures. The Bible mentions them directly. In Deuteronomy, Joshua, and other historical books, entire peoples known for their great stature, their enormous strength, and their fortified cities are listed. The Anakim, who lived in Hebron and were so imposing that the Israelite spies felt like grasshoppers beside them. The Rephaim, also called the Silent Ones, who dwelt in Bashan. The Emim, the Terrible Ones, who filled the Moabites with fear. The Zamzumites, known for their violence. The Zuzites, Suzites, and Avites, tribes scattered across the region, all described as great peoples, numerous and feared. Even the names of their cities seemed to carry the weight of their legend. Bashan, land of King Og, whose iron bed measured over 13 feet long. Hazor, with its cyclopean walls. Ashdod, Gath, Ashkelon, Philistine cities that, according to ancient traditions, were built by giants before the flood and later occupied by their descendants. Modern archaeologists have discovered ruins with stones so immense they would be impossible to move with primitive tools. The walls of Bashan, for instance, seem more like the work of titans than human tribes. Some scholars have speculated that such structures weren't merely fortresses, but attempts by the giants to endure, as if by raising eternal cities, they sought to cheat heaven's judgment. And though most of Israel's people never faced the pre-flood Nephilim directly, their descendants did encounter those who came after. Centuries later, the people of Israel, led by Moses, approached the Promised Land and, obeying God's voice, sent 12 spies to explore the land of Canaan, that Promised Land their fathers had only dreamed of. They walked for days, crossing rivers and mountains, observing vast vineyards and walled cities that rose like stone giants. But among everything they saw, something struck terror into their hearts. The sons of Anak, men of imposing stature, descendants of bloodlines that memory linked to the ancient giants. When the spies returned, 10 of them spoke with trembling voices. "We also saw giants there, sons of Anak, from the race of giants, and we seemed like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we appeared to them as well." Fear spread like wildfire among the people. That night Israel wept and grumbled against Moses and Aaron, saying, "Why has the Lord brought us to this land to die by the sword? Let us return to Egypt." The heart of the multitude filled with despair. But then Joshua and Caleb rose up, their voices firm amid the outcry. "If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us. Do not fear the people of this land, for we will devour them like bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us." It was a moment of light in the midst of fear, a reminder that the size of the giants could not compare to the power of God. Over the years, the promise was fulfilled. Under Joshua's leadership, Moses' successor Israel crossed the Jordan, and the people prepared to take the land that had been promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so began the great conquest of Canaan. The fortified cities fell one after another. First fell Hebron, known as the land of the sons of Anak. Giants feared for their height and strength. Then Debir was taken, an ancient city, a place of wisdom and worship, which now surrendered before the God of Israel. Next came Anab, another stronghold where the descendants of giants believed themselves invincible. But they too could not resist. Each victory was not only military but spiritual. With each wall torn down, the altars dedicated to foreign gods also fell. And then came the final confrontation. Og, king of Bashan, a man so imposing that scripture details his iron bed of more than 13 feet long as testimony to his enormous size. Og was known as the last of the Rephates, a living remnant of dark bloodlines that stretched back to the days before the flood. But Israel, strengthened by God's presence, faced him without fear. Og fell beneath the sword, and with him his entire army. The cities of his kingdom were razed to the ground, and the symbols of his dominion turned to dust. The altars raised to false gods were torn down. The names of the giants began to fade from the earth, and the echoes of the Nephilim and their dark reign fell silent. It was the obedience of the people, guided by the living God, that tore through the shadow of that past, and the promised land began to become what it was always destined to be, a place for the fulfillment of the promise. Yet the tales of giants did not vanish. Judges and kings rose and fell, but the stories of giants lived on in the memory of the people. In the land of the Philistines arose a warrior whose very presence seemed to bring back the echo of the ancient Nephilim, Goliath of Gath. His height reached nearly 10 feet, his bronze armor weighed as much as a full-grown man, and his spear was like a weaver's beam. For 40 days he appeared each morning and each evening, challenging the army of Israel with a voice that thundered through the mountains. Choose a man to come down and fight me. If he defeats me, we will be your servants. If I defeat him, you will be our slaves. Fear swept through Israel's camp, and no one dared step forward. But then David, a young shepherd, arrived at the camp bringing supplies to his brothers. He was just a boy, but he was outraged when he heard Goliath's challenges and insisted on being brought before King Saul. The king tried to give him his armor, but David refused it and chose instead his staff, his sling, 5 smooth stones from the brook, and his faith. When he approached the battlefield, the giants scorned him and laughed at him. But David responded with words that have echoed through the centuries. You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. The Lord will deliver you into my hands today, and all the earth will know that there is a God in Israel. When the giant advanced cursing, suddenly David ran toward Goliath with surprising speed. He reached into his bag, pulled out a smooth stone, and placed it in his sling. And with one swift, precise motion, he hurled the stone with all his strength, aiming it straight at the giant's forehead. The stone sailed through the air and buried itself in Goliath's forehead with brutal impact. The giant swayed for a moment, his eyes rolled back, and he crashed face first into the ground, sending up a cloud of dust. Without wasting time, David lunged at Goliath's lifeless body. He seized the giant's sword and with one decisive blow cut off his head and raised it high, shouting, "This battle belongs to the Lord." But the story of the giants didn't end with Goliath's fall. Scripture tells us that in the years that followed, other giants arose among the Philistines, as if the shadow of those ancient Nephilim bloodlines still refused to fade away. In one of those wars, Ishbi-Benob, a fearsome warrior wielding a heavy bronze spear, sought to kill the now aging David in the heat of battle. When the king found himself exhausted and vulnerable, Abishai, son of Zeruiah, one of his most loyal mighty men, rushed to his aid immediately, rescued him, and struck down the giant before he could carry out his threat. In another battle, Saph rose up, also from the race of giants, but his strength proved no match for the sword of Sibbecai the Hushathite, who cut him down in combat. Later on, the name of Lami, identified as Goliath's brother, was heard on the battlefields. His spear was as formidable as his fallen brothers, but Elhanan, son of Jair from Bethlehem, defeated him in fierce combat, once again leaving the Philistines without their champion. And there's still the story told of a man from Gath, a monstrous being who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 on each foot, 24 in total. His very appearance struck terror, but he too was brought down by a man of God, Jonathan, son of Shimea, a nephew of David, who struck him down and put an end to his defiance. Each of these giants carried within them echoes of the ancient Nephilim, believing themselves invincible, but all fell before something they could never measure or conquer: faith and obedience. But centuries later, in the days of the prophet Daniel, a disturbing image emerged once again, this time not in flesh and blood, but in dreams. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, saw a massive statue, the head of gold, the chest of silver, the belly of bronze, the legs of iron, and finally, the feet, a mixture of iron and baked clay. Daniel interpreted the dream with heavenly wisdom, revealing that this statue represented the human empires to come. But it was the final material that caused the most fear. And just as you saw iron mixed with clay, so they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. This wasn't simply a warning, it was a veiled prophecy, because that phrase, "they will mingle with the seed of men," has no clear precedent in other biblical texts. It speaks of hybridization, an unnatural union, and many connected it to something that had already happened once before, in the days of Enoch. The Watchers had tried it before, mixing their nature with that of humans to create a corrupted seed. And according to Daniel, in the last days that same attempt would be repeated, not in the fields of the earth, but in laboratories, in hidden pacts, depths, in towers that rise today, not to worship God, but to replace him. Apocryphal texts like the Book of Giants suggest that the bloodline of the fallen never completely disappeared, that there is a plan that remains in the shadows, waiting for its moment. The Book of Enoch, in its darkest and most prophetic visions, declares that when the Nephilim died during the flood, their souls did not ascend to heaven, nor descend to Sheol like those of men. They were not received by God, nor welcomed by the earth. They were condemned to wander. Because the Nephilim were born from an illicit union of human flesh with fallen celestial spirit, and their souls became trapped in an impure limbo with no place in any of the realms. Thus, the fate of the Nephilim spirits was to roam the earth without flesh, without home, without redemption. Wandering spirits, demons, unclean spirits, stripped of flesh, began their relentless search for bodies to inhabit. Their hunger was unlike anything human. They craved neither food nor drink, but dominion. They yearned to possess bodies, twist thoughts, incite violence, awaken lust, and spread the corruption their bloodline had already tasted. Enoch describes how these bodiless souls brought violence, corruption, disease, oppression, and temptation in their wake. They were shadows of an ancient sin, a transgression that still whispered from the darkness. They stir up bloodshed, kindle lust, and bend the will of the weak. And here is where many spiritual traditions, both Jewish and early Christian, begin to intertwine. Some ancient interpreters identified these wandering spirits as demons, unredeemed souls without bodies, yet desperate to possess, tempt, and drag men down to share their fate of damnation. This is why Jesus, centuries later, confronted these unclean spirits. In his first public encounters, it wasn't the Pharisees or the learned who recognized him, it was the demons. Bodiless spirits, the cursed legacy of the Watcher's sin, trembled at the sight of his face. One of them, possessing a man in the synagogue, cried out in desperation, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." It wasn't a question. It was the recognition of absolute authority. They knew what men still didn't understand. They knew that the judgment prophesied by Enoch had been activated, and they knew their end was drawing near. Jesus needed only his word to cast them out. Come out of him. But the story didn't end with the Messiah's first coming. We arrive at the final book, Revelation. In chapter 9, the fifth angel raises his trumpet and heaven breaks open in sound and meaning. The fifth angel sounds his trumpet, and John, the beloved disciple, the one who leaned against Jesus' chest, watches with spiritual eyes and sees a star fallen from heaven, receiving a key. It's the key to the abyss. And when that key turns, something is unleashed. From the bowels of the earth, the pit of hell opens, and thick smoke covers the earth like the darkest night. And from that smoke emerge creatures. They're not locusts, though that's what they're called. They're deformed beasts with human faces, long hair like women, but their mouths bite like hungry lions. They wear breastplates of iron, and when their wings beat, they sound like war chariots thundering across the world. These creatures don't kill, they're made to torment. For 5 months they pursue mankind, and those who encounter them cannot die, though they wish they could. And then John writes a chilling phrase. They have as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek Apollyon. That name, forgotten for centuries, Abaddon, is a prince of the abyss, one who, according to ancient texts, was a commander among the fallen watchers. He is the one who walked with Azazel and Semjaza, who sowed corruption and made blood pacts, and who was chained beneath the earth when Enoch still walked among men. And now, he has been set free. The earth trembles, the abyss stands open, and the ancient spirits, those very ones born from the unholy union between angels and human women, the Nephilim without body, without soul, ascend wrapped in new forms, symbolic, spiritual, apocalyptic. They no longer seek to rule with swords. Now they mark, possess, manipulate. They are the prelude to the great deception, heralds of the final lie, and humanity is not ready. But the account doesn't stop there. In chapter 13, John is carried away in spirit to see the end times, and what he sees is terrifying, yet familiar. What John saw rising from the sea was no ordinary beast. It was an impossible creature, a fusion of beasts and symbols. It had the agile body of a leopard, but walked with the crushing strength of a bear, and its mouth roared like that of a ravenous lion. Crowns blazed upon its horns, and from its mouth poured blasphemies like razor blades, words that defied everything holy. This creature wasn't just powerful. It possessed authority, it ruled, it dominated, and the entire world gazed upon it in wonder, as if they had been waiting for its arrival, as if something deep within the human soul recognized its presence and surrendered. But this design wasn't new. Within its twisted form lay remnants of an ancient memory. Its essence seemed to gather fragments of primordial corruption, a warped echo of the pride of the ancient Nephilim. The beast sought not just power, but worship, and at the center of it all, at the core of its corrupt design, lay the ancient plan of the fallen angels, to create their own image, their own offspring, their own system, a twisted version of God's kingdom. And the world, mesmerized by its power, began to kneel and accept the mark. But after the beast's brief reign comes Revelation 20. Satan is released for a short time, and in that final opportunity, he summons the most distant peoples, those who dwell at the edges of the earth, the far reaches of the north, Gog and Magog. This isn't the first time we've heard their names. Ezekiel had already mentioned them centuries before as enemies of Israel, as monstrous armies that would come from the north to invade the Holy Land. But now, at the end of times, they rise again as if they were the symbolic descendants of a forbidden bloodline. It was said that Gog and Magog were nations born from mixture, from corruption, lands sealed by Alexander the Great beyond the mountains, where deformed races dwelt, giants, hybrid beings who awaited the hour of their release. And that hour arrived. Gog and Magog surround the camp of the saints. Their armies spread like a dark sea. They are countless, fierce, driven by an ancient hatred that has burned since the days of the Nephilim. But there is no battle. Fire descends from heaven, and in an instant, everything is consumed. As in the days of Noah, as in Sodom, God's justice falls with absolute, unquestionable force. And then heaven and earth flee from his presence. The white throne blazes, the books are opened, and the dead, great and small, are summoned. The final judgment has begun. Heaven opens, and the faithful and true rider appears. Mounted on a white horse, his name is the Word of God, and he does not come alone. Behind him rides an army clothed in fine linen, white and shining. Angels and the redeemed heavenly soldiers prepared not for a battle with human swords, but for a victory decreed from before the foundation of the world. The Messiah returns, and in his presence thrones are set in place, books are opened, and names from the book of life are read aloud. The ancient serpent is cast into the lake of fire, where the smoke of his torment will rise forever and ever. The fallen watchers, those who abandoned their dwelling place and brought darkness into the hearts of men, receive their eternal sentence. And the Nephilim, those born from forbidden union, those who defied creation by their very existence, now without body, without glory, without escape, they too face judgment. What they once sowed through violence and corruption, they now reap in condemnation. All receive their final sentence. But this was already written. For long before the flood, long before Abraham walked the earth, it had already been proclaimed that the conflict between God's seed and the forces of corruption would have a final outcome. And it was Enoch who saw it all. In the midst of his heavenly visions, Enoch witnessed something that would shake any future generation. He saw the end. He saw the coming of the judge, and he was not coming alone. He saw the Son of Man descending from the heights, surrounded by countless holy beings, radiant and ready to execute judgment upon all ungodliness. This is what Enoch recorded. Behold, the Lord comes with his holy 10,000s to execute judgment on all. And centuries later, Jude would confirm it in his letter, to convict all who are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have committed in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Enoch's prophecy was not forgotten, it was sealed in time, and then confirmed by the Holy Spirit in the New Testament. For the same Son of Man who was despised and crucified will return, no longer as the Lamb, but as the Lion, no longer as servant, but as King. His return is terrible for the wicked, but glorious for the righteous. The heavens will open, and every corrupt power will be shaken from its foundations. For the judgment announced by Enoch is yet to be fulfilled, and the Son of Man has not forgotten. He is coming, and with him the judgment that will forever seal the fate of the fallen angels and wandering spirits who brought such harm to humanity. Because the story of the Nephilim, the Watchers, the giants and their spirits are not ancient tales, they are living warnings, echoes of a corruption that has never stopped trying to infiltrate every generation.
In an age where truth and deception intertwine, the ancient echoes of warning grow louder. Today's challenge isn't celestial beings mingling with humanity, but the intricate web of truths laced with lies. Just as in Noah's time, many are dazzled by what glitters, captivated by voices that exude power, unaware of the pride lurking beneath, a signature mark of the fallen. This narrative serves as a resounding alarm. Sharpen your discernment. Not every radiant revelation carries divine origin. Behind some doctrines, cloaked in the guise of wisdom, lies arrogance. Vigorous movements may harbor the same rebellious spirit that fueled the giants of old: defiance, disobedience, and corruption. In Enoch's era, only a few heeded the call. In Noah's time, just one family remained faithful. The warning endures even now. Guard your soul. Resist the seductive whispers of power, the allure of what's hybrid, tainted, and godless. God's nature remains unchanged. The same God who judged the rebellious angels, cleansed the earth with a flood, and preserved Noah in the ark, promises to shield his own amidst life's fiery trials. Though dark forces roam seeking to corrupt, there reigns one sovereign in the heavens, holy, faithful, and just. His covenant stands unbroken, reflected in every rainbow, renewed with each dawn. God never forgets his promises. The tale of the Nephilim serves as a beacon. In a world filled with conflicting voices, not all that sparkles is divine. Now, more than ever, we need discernment to see beyond the surface and uncover genuine truth. If this message resonates with you, countless stories await discovery. Join us in bringing the Bible to life through captivating storytelling and timeless truths. Subscribe to our channel and share this journey. Together, let's pick Bible daily.